I begged my fiancé to take me back after cheating, but when I fell for a married coworker, I destroyed everything again and only learned the truth when his wife exposed us both. When I saw Chase's text, my heart dropped. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't calling me names. He was calm. Too calm. And that's when I knew I had just shattered the heart of the only man who had ever truly loved me. I was engaged to Chase. We'd been together for nearly 6 years. We met back in undergrad in Austin, Texas. I was 23 when we started dating. He was 24, solid, dependable, with a smile that could calm hurricanes. But during our 3rd year together, I threw it all away. I cheated. Not with a stranger, but with someone dangerously close. A family friend named Mason. He was older, charming in that careless way, and knew just how to make someone like me feel seen when I was trying to disappear in plain sight. I took Chase for granted. That's the simplest, ugliest truth. I thought our relationship was so strong it could survive my boredom. And it nearly didn't. When Chase found out, he broke things off, left our shared apartment in Dallas, and didn't look back. I spent 4 months single, numb at first, then haunted. That time alone cracked something open in me. I finally understood what I'd lost. I begged for him back. I cried in his voicemail inbox, wrote emails he never read. And then one night, he showed up. Quiet. Hesitant. We talked. We cried. He agreed to give me another chance, but under one strict condition. I was to cut off all contact with Mason. No calls, no texts, not even polite nods at family reunions. I agreed. And for 2 years, I kept that promise. I never cheated again. I wasn't even tempted. I realized what a rare kind of man Chase was. Gentle, honest, quietly brilliant. But life has a funny way of testing you again just when you think you've passed the worst part of the exam. It started small. Mason sent a message about a mutual friend's funeral. Just a few lines. Condolences. I didn't answer at first. But a week later, I wrote back. Just friendly. Nothing romantic. We even joked about old family barbecues. And that's all it was. Until Chase found out. He was livid. Not explosive, but betrayed in the way that makes a man question the very foundations of reality. He didn't yell. He just left for 2 days and came back with a list. He texted me what he called non-negotiables. Rules. Not suggestions. And when I tell you I copied and pasted that list into a note and stared at it for an hour, I mean it. I'll read you exactly what he wrote. I can't trust you. Not after this. Maybe it wasn't cheating in your eyes, but to me, it's the same violation. The difference is just a technicality. I'm not walking away this time, but the wedding is postponed indefinitely. If we go forward, you will cut off Mason again, completely. You will not attend family events where he's present. You will ignore him if he shows up unexpectedly. I need unrestricted access to your phone, emails, socials. All passwords. You won't hang out with male friends alone. If you go out, you'll be home by 1 a.m. These aren't up for discussion. You can decide if this is something you're willing to do. I won't be calling you again until you've made your choice. It felt like a punch in the chest. I hadn't cheated. Not this time. But he was right. I had gone behind his back. I violated his trust again. And maybe even worse than the first time. Because this time I claimed to be a changed woman. Everyone I talked to said he was being too harsh. That he was trying to control me. That it was emotional punishment. But deep down, I knew. He was just trying to protect what little was left of us. So what did I do? I said yes. I told him I would follow every rule. Not because I was weak, not because I was desperate, but because I still believed we had a future. And maybe, just maybe, I still deserved it. But here's the thing. I had no idea what was coming next. I thought I had learned my lesson. I thought I had grown. I was wrong. What happened next destroyed everything. And this time, it wasn't just me who paid the price. You ever stand on the edge of a good thing and just leap? Not because you want to fall, but because some broken part of you wants to test if the net is still there. That was me, 3 months after Chase and I started rebuilding. We'd postponed the wedding. I followed every rule. I shared my passwords, never saw Mason again, even skipped a cousin's birthday when I found out he'd be there. Chase started to soften, little by little. He laughed more. His touches lingered longer. I felt like we were finding our way back. And then, I met Ryan. It sounds ridiculous now, but at the time, it felt like fate. He was the new creative lead at the tech company I worked for in Houston. Tall, salt and pepper hair. Those laugh lines that made you feel like he smiled even when he wasn't smiling. When we were introduced, I actually felt my stomach flip. That hadn't happened since Chase. We were assigned to the same project. Branding overhaul for a new AI product. Late meetings, brainstorming lunches, texts that started with "remind me to ask you about" and ended with "you really get it." It stayed professional for a while. Until one Thursday, I found myself laughing too hard at his joke, and he reached over to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. A small, stupid gesture. But it felt electric. That night, I stared at myself in the mirror for almost an hour. I hadn't done anything wrong, but I felt the ground starting to shake again. The next week, he confessed he had feelings. He said he hadn't touched his wife in months, that he couldn't stand being at home anymore because it felt like lying. "When I look at her," he whispered, "I feel like I'm cheating on you." And God help me, I understood exactly what he meant. I hadn't been intimate with Chase in weeks. Not because of anger or distance, but because I couldn't do it while thinking of someone else. And that someone else was Ryan. We never kissed. Not then. But emotional cheating? That line had already been crossed, drawn in chalk and erased before I even noticed. He promised he would leave his wife, that they were separating anyway, that it was only finances holding him back. He wanted to build a new life with me. And I believed him. I started planning how to end things with Chase. Not because I stopped caring about him, but because I didn't want to lie anymore. I kept telling myself this wasn't like the first time. This time I was in love. This time I hadn't been selfish. I'd been powerless. Who chooses who they fall for? Of course, I knew it would destroy Chase. But I told myself he'd be better off. That I wasn't the woman he thought I was. That maybe I never had been. The closer our rescheduled wedding got, the more I panicked. I wrote the breakup speech in my notes app 10 times over. Then deleted it. Then rewrote it. I rehearsed in my head what I'd say when I told my parents, my friends, everyone. But I couldn't do it. Not yet. So I waited. And while I waited, Ryan's wife was still in the dark. Because she wouldn't understand, he said. Because timing was everything. What I didn't realize then, what no one tells you when you're wrapped up in the fantasy of stolen love, is that timing is a clock you don't control. And sooner or later, it stops for everyone. The moment that broke, everything didn't come from Chase. It came from Ryan. And when it did, I learned that I wasn't the only one he was making promises to. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is what I did after I found out. It happened on a rainy Tuesday. I remember because I was in the conference room rehearsing a pitch when Ryan's phone buzzed. He was across the table. I watched him glance at the screen, then pale. He excused himself. That's not unusual in corporate meetings. But what followed? That was a whole different animal. 30 minutes later, he still wasn't back. One of the assistants mentioned he left the building. No explanation. That night, I texted him. "Everything okay?" No response. The next morning, he called. Voice flat. "She found out." Just like that. No build-up, no emotion. Just, she found out. Apparently, his wife had gone through his old phone, one he thought he'd wiped clean. She saw the messages, the late-night check-ins, the emojis, the "you make me feel alive" texts. But the kicker? She also found messages from another woman, someone named Courtney, another coworker, another soulmate. My stomach dropped. "Wait," I said, voice tight. "Courtney." Silence. "She was before you," he mumbled. "But it's over now." He said it like it was obvious. Like I should understand. Like he was the victim of his own emotional generosity. Something broke in me then. Like a dam giving way under years of pressure. I hung up. No yelling. No confrontation. Just silence. For the first time in months, I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity. And that night, I had a dream. A vivid, painful memory from 10 years ago. I was 21. Broke, insecure, and in love with a boy named Darren. He worked at the dive bar down the street from my dorm. Handsome in a lazy way. He'd write poems on napkins and pretend to read Bukowski while ogling sorority girls. I was just another girl in his orbit. But I didn't care. I made myself useful, drove him to shifts, lent him money, cleaned his apartment. He called me his muse. And I believed him. Then one night, I showed up with dinner and found him with someone else. A waitress. Younger. Prettier. Wearing my hoodie. When I confronted him, he said the same thing Ryan had. "You knew I wasn't exclusive." Like I should have been grateful to be part of his emotional buffet. Back then, I blamed myself. I thought I hadn't been enough. That I was too intense, too eager, too something. But now, standing in my apartment, holding the phone with Ryan's silence buzzing in my ear, I realized it had never been me. These men weren't complicated. They were just opportunistic. And I was a repeat offender in my own life story, falling for emotionally unavailable men and burning good love in the process. I finally called Chase. I wish I could say I told him everything, that I laid it all bare like a penitent sinner. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I said I was overwhelmed, that I needed space, that maybe the wedding should be postponed longer. Chase was quiet. Then he said something that gutted me. I knew when you started dressing up for work again. When you laughed at your phone the way you used to laugh with me. I knew. I was just hoping I was wrong. He wasn't crying. He sounded tired. Then he hung up. And I stood there, $1,000 dress in my closet, a ring on my finger, and no one left who still believed in me. But that wasn't the end. Because what I didn't know was that Ryan's wife had plans of her own. And I was about to be dragged into the center of a very public, very messy scandal. It started with a Facebook post. Not mine. Hers. Ryan's wife, Danielle, was a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a partner at a firm known for eating its enemies alive and flossing with NDAs. When I saw her name pop up on my notifications, I clicked out of reflex. What I saw made my blood run cold. PSA to all the women out there. If your husband works in tech and suddenly starts using branding meetings as excuses to come home late, check his phone. Especially if he starts throwing around words like soulmate. Ask Courtney. Ask Emily. Ask Lauren. And ask Elena, our newest recruit. Underneath was a photo collage. Screenshots of messages. Blurred faces, but mine wasn't one of them. No, my photo was front and center. One from our company retreat. I was wearing a red dress, holding a wine glass, laughing. Ryan was beside me. His hand, very clearly, on my waist. There were over 300 shares within an hour. Friends from college texted. Old coworkers. Even my cousin Amber sent, hey, is this about you? Messages with 1,000 ellipses. And then came the fallout. HR called me into a meeting the next day. Said the company was investigating inappropriate conduct. Not because I'd broken a rule, I hadn't technically, but because he had, and I was collateral damage. Ryan didn't even show up. Word was, he'd taken a leave of absence. Family emergency. I heard from a mutual friend that Danielle had kicked him out, frozen their joint accounts, and was building a case. I was radioactive. Chase didn't respond to my texts anymore. His last message read, I lied when I said I didn't check your Instagram. I saw the photo of you and Ryan. You looked happy, just not the way you ever looked with me. My stomach churned. I wanted to scream. Not because I was innocent, I wasn't, but because I hadn't meant for any of this. I thought I could keep it clean, make a quiet exit, spare feelings. But there's no such thing as a quiet betrayal. I tried to lay low, work from home, avoid family, but you can't outrun what you've posted, texted, or liked. The internet doesn't forget, and neither do people. 2 weeks after the post, I ran into Danielle. Of all places, it was at a coffee shop downtown. I was grabbing tea. She was there with a friend. She saw me, didn't blink, and walked straight up. I braced for a slap. I would have understood. Instead, she handed me a manila envelope. Read it, she said. And don't make the same mistake I did. Don't believe someone just because they tell you what you want to hear. Then she left. I opened it right there. Inside were printed messages. Ryan, confessing to someone, probably his therapist or a friend, that none of the women he was involved with knew about each other. That he manipulated their insecurities. That he loved the power of being wanted. He called it his gift. I wanted to vomit. And that's when the final nail hit. A month later, Ryan's wife went fully public, with legal filings, media attention, and a podcast interview titled The Code of Silence in Corporate Affairs. Guess who they blurred out? Not me. The episode went viral. Overnight, I became that girl. The woman who wrecked her own engagement and nearly got fired for a man who wasn't even hers. But the worst part? Chase started dating again. And his new girlfriend? Her name was Grace. She looked kind. She looked like someone who didn't have secrets. And I realized, as I watched them post photos from the state fair together, matching shirts and cotton candy smiles, that he was building the life I'd once begged for. Only now, I wasn't part of it. But karma wasn't done with me yet. Because the moment I tried to start over, to move to a new city and finally rebuild, someone else from my past showed up and brought everything crashing down again. When I moved to Denver 6 months later, I thought I was doing what people do when their lives implode. New city, new job, new haircut, I found a little apartment above a bakery that smelled like cinnamon every morning and convinced myself that healing was just a matter of keeping busy. I didn't tell anyone my real story. I told new friends that I'd ended a long engagement, that I'd left Houston to chase better air and better vibes. I didn't mention Chase. I definitely didn't mention Ryan. I avoided red flags the way a recovering addict avoids bars. Until him. His name was Matthew. We met at a climbing gym, of all places. I was trash at it. He offered to help me with my grip. It was innocent, real, safe. For a while, he worked in marketing. Divorced, no kids. Funny in a dad joke kind of way. I liked how quiet his life seemed. No scandal. No secrets. He listened when I talked. Actually listened. And when he finally asked if I wanted to grab dinner, I said yes. The night of our first real date, I wore a green wrap dress. Something about it made me feel like the version of myself I'd almost forgotten, before betrayal, before heartbreak, before viral shaming. We were halfway through dessert when he paused. "You look really familiar," he said slowly, tilting his head. "Do you know a guy named Chase? Chase Coleman?" My fork clinked against my plate. My blood ran cold. "What? Chase? Tall guy. Used to be in tech sales? I worked with him a few years ago. We golfed a couple times. He's dating one of my clients now. Grace something?" My chest tightened. Matthew's voice was casual, completely unaware. But my past? It had just punched through the present like a freight train. "Yeah." I managed, my voice thinner than I wanted. "I knew him." He smiled. Small world. I excused myself to the bathroom and stared at my reflection. The same old shame climbed up my throat. The irony was brutal. Of all the cities, of all the gyms, of all the dates, I'd somehow found someone who knew. I could have ghosted. I could have cut ties and vanished again. But something inside me cracked open. The next morning, I called Matthew. "Do you remember Danielle Voss? The lawyer from Houston? She went viral last year." He laughed softly. "The podcast woman? Exposed her husband's cheating?" "Of course." "That was me," I said. "I was one of the women." Silence. And I wasn't just one of. I was the one who thought he was leaving her. I ruined my engagement. I lied. I was that girl in the photo with the wine glass. I expected a dial tone. A slam. At best, a cold goodbye. But what I heard was this. "Well, damn. I didn't see that coming." Then, after a beat. "Thank you for telling me. It wasn't perfect. Things between us never got serious." But he didn't ghost. He didn't shame me. He stayed human. That small grace cracked something else open in me. And for the first time, I reached out, not to Chase, but to Grace. The message I sent was short. "You don't know me, but you're dating someone I loved once. He's a good man." I wasn't. "I hope you both are happy." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Final thoughts. I lost the love of my life. I fell for a fantasy that nearly destroyed me. I was dragged through the mud, twice. And still, somehow, I came out standing. Not clean, not innocent, but real. And sometimes, that's all you get.